Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. Luke chapter 12, verses 13 through 21. And it's entitled, What is Your More? What is your more? Verses 13 and 14 state that someone from the crowd said to him, Teacher, tell my brother to divide the family inheritance with me. But he said to him, Man, who appointed me a judge or an arbiter over the two of you? You see, this inappropriate request that was made to Christ by one of his hearers, asking him to intervene between him and his brother in a matter that concerned the estate of the family. He said, Master, speak to my brother. Speak as a prophet. Speak as a king. Speak with authority. He is the one that will have regard to what you say. Speak to him that he divide the inheritance with me. Now, some people think that his brother did him wrong and that he was appealing to Christ to right him because he knew that the law was costly. His brother was one of the Jews called Ben-Hamanson, or son of violence, that took not only his own part of the estate, but his brother's too, and forcibly detained it from him. There's some brothers like that in this world today, aren't there? Who have no sense at either all of the natural equity or natural affection. Don't love nobody, don't respect nobody. Who make a victim of those that they should protect. They who are so wrong have God to go to, though, who will execute judgment and justice. Now, others think that he had a mind to do his brother wrong and would have Christ to assist him. But see, what we're talking about here, that law, Deuteronomy 21, 16 and 17, it says that the oldest brother, at the death of the father, inherits a double portion. And this young man was trying to get Christ to circumvent the law and say, look, he shouldn't get a double portion. Let me get half and he get half. And Christ was basically saying to him, that's not my business. His brother had asked him to alter the law and oblige his brother, who was a follower of Christ, and asked him to divide the inheritance equally with him, what they call an in-gavel kind, meaning half and half, and to allot him as much as his older brother, which was really not his portion. I suspect that this was the case because Christ took occasion to warn all of them about covetousness, or pleonexia, which is the desire of having more than God in his providence has allotted us. As for my subject this morning is, what's your more? It was not a lawful desire that this guy was asking for. He wasn't asking for his own. It was a sinful desire of asking for more than his own. And I ask you today, what is your more? What are you asking for more of that's not your portion? In verse 14, Christ refused to intervene in this matter. He said, Man, who made me a judge or divider over you? In matters of this nature, Christ will not assume either a legislative power to alter the settled rule of inheritance or a judicial power to determine controversies concerning them. Now, he could have done the judge's part and the lawyer's part as well as he did the physician's and could have ended this right away. But he didn't do that. That was not his commission. That's not Jesus was sent here for. That's why he said, who made me a judge? And he was talking about how they did Moses. They asked Moses that same question. He said, if I should offer to do this, you would taunt me as you did Moses. Who made thee a judge or divider? So he corrected that man's mistake and would not admit his appeal because it was not before a proper judge. These were matters, civil matters, not spiritual matters. Jesus said, you're talking to the hand. This is not what I'm here for. That's a bitter dispute between you and your brother, and I'm not going to bow down to it. Christ could, now if he had been talking about his pursuit for his heavenly inheritance, then Christ would have given him his best help. But to this matter, he has nothing to do with it. Jesus knew his lane, and he took no honor, no power to himself. But that power was given to him by his Father, and whatever he did, it was in line with what his Father would have him to do. Jesus knew his lane, and he stayed in his lane. Now this shows us the nature and the constitution of Christ's kingdom. Christ's kingdom is a spiritual kingdom, and it's not of this world. And we get confused with this thing because we are caught up in the world and the world stuff. And that's what we pay a lot of attention to. And we ignore the spiritual thing over here on this other side. Christ said, I don't get involved in civil issues. It's not my business. Those are rules that man made and settled, and I don't have any part in that. So what he was really saying to this guy was, don't expect worldly favors because of your religion. Christ doesn't do you favors because you accepted him. You accept Christ on Christ's terms, not yours. All right, God, I went to church, so give me something. That ain't how it works. That's not the way it works. He was mistaken. He doesn't encourage us in our contest between each other. Got nothing to do with that. Whether we have a rigorous demand for peace sake, Christ says, turn the other cheek. He hit me first. Okay, turn the other cheek. You see where I'm going with this? His view of things is not the same as our view of things. In accordance with 2 Timothy 2 and 4, it says it does not allow ministers to entangle themselves in the affairs of this life. In other words, to leave the work and the word of God to go focus on some foolishness, something that has nothing to do with nothing. Jesus didn't come here to be a divider of men's estates. He came to be a director of their conscience about their estates and to warn us of all that clinging and how corrupt it is when we cling to stuff. And all we want is stuff. And stuff is the root of all evil. The most visible stuff is that stuff we call money. And what folks won't do for money. My question to you this morning is, what is your more? What do you want more of? Money? Time? Cars? A man? A woman? Toys? Clothes? What do you want more of? I told you guys about that house I went in that had no TVs. And a big sign up there that says, all I need is a little bit of coffee and a whole lot of Jesus. How many of us wake up every day with our greatest ambition being getting some more Jesus? No. A lot of us wake up every day with our greatest ambition to get a little more cheese. If we tell the truth, right? What constitutes a successful day? A big paycheck or an epiphany from God? What are we looking for? What are we looking for? You rather I pay you or pray for you? Let's be real. You rather get paid or prayed? Just saying. In verse 15, he said to them, watch out and guard yourselves against every form of greed. For not even when one has an overflowing abundance does his life consist of, nor is it derived from his possessions. In verses 16 through 21, as Pat alluded to, there's a parable about the rich man. And it says, there was a rich man whose land was very fertile and productive. And he began thinking to himself, what shall I do since I have no place large enough in which to store my crops? Then he said, this is what I will do. I will tear down my storehouses and my barns and build larger ones. And I will store all my grain and my goods there. And I will say to my soul, hear this. And I will say to my soul, soul, you have many good things stored up, enough for many years. Rest and relax. Eat, drink, and be merry. Celebrate continuously. But God said to him, you fool, this very night your soul is required of you. And now, who will own all the things you have prepared? So it is for the one who continues to store up and hoard possessions for himself and is not rich in his relationship toward God. You can't take that stuff with you. You can't tell them who to give it to. You can try, you can do that in a will and some of that, but it don't always work that way. In verse 15, he cautions ourselves to take heed and beware of covetousness. Observe ourselves, keep a jealous eye upon your own hearts. Let covetousness principles steal into them, and preserve yourselves. Keep a strict ban on your own hearts, lest covetous principles rule and give them law. See, covetousness is a sin which we need to constantly watch against. It's very easy to be satisfied with what you have until you see something somebody else has. And all of a sudden, that joy that you had is gone. That car that brought you here and is going to take you home, when you saw that, what's a nice car? That big Mercedes that looked like a spaceship. What's that other one where everything operates off your face? Tesla. That's it.
Who said Tesla?
You know, you're fine in your Ford. I'm fine in my Ford F-150. And when somebody pulls up beside you with that F-250 with the big tail rack on it, and it's tempting to say, next time. The reason to enforce this caution against being covetous is that a man's life does not consist in the abundance of the things he owns. That's not who you are. Our happiness and our comfort don't depend on our having a great deal of wealth in this world. And I'm glad it doesn't. The life of the soul undoubtedly does not depend on him. And the soul of the man. When this man said to his soul, soul, you have a barn full of stuff that's going to last for years. The soul is spirit. It don't eat. It don't care about grain. He didn't know that. Even the life of the body and the happiness of it does not consist in abundance of these things. For many people live a very good and fulfilling life and get through this world very comfortably with just a little bit of the world's wealth. And on the other hand, you got many people that are filthy rich, but they're sad and lonely. I remember a guy that I used to love to watch his show, his food show. He'd be traveling all over the world, all these different places, and tasting all these different food and telling you all these stories about these, and then he killed himself.
Yeah.
What's the lady's name? Kate Spade or whatever? Millionaire. All these pocketbooks and purses and shoes and all this stuff. And it just, and when you think about this, I mean, we talked about Miss Mary's son. He was 17. He was 17. What can be so bad at 17? You know, that's not for us to decide what's going on in somebody else's heart, their mind, their lives. That's why Jesus said we are the fellowship. Because when you come to church, you don't know who you might be lifting up. Who might be right at the edge. Who would think a 17-year-old would be at the edge? Suicide pacts. What is that? What could be so bad that two people agree that we're going to kill ourselves? We get caught up in the stuff of this world, and sometimes you're so caught up in the stuff of this world that it makes you, and if you don't have enough of the stuff in this world, you feel like you're less than. You're not worth life itself. And that's not what life is. That's not who you are. Everybody in here has a spirit which will not accept death. Death is a physical condition. At the approach of death, the spirit departs and it goes somewhere for eternity. So don't get confused about what's happening in this world. It's temporary. It ain't that serious. I don't care how much money it is, ain't that much. You can't take it with you.
Right.
It's just stuff. But we pass people that we should value every day with no value. Sometimes we don't even speak. That's what's important. Relationships, people, not stuff. It's like that lady that called me over. She gave me 4 $5 bills and 7 $1 bills, $27. I could be wrong, but I think it might have been her tips. But she didn't want to have a lot of conversation. I said to her, service will be Sunday at 11 o'clock. She said, I work mornings. I said, well, we have Bible study on Wednesday at 6. She said, I work mornings. I said, no, it's 6 in the evening. She said, oh, I might be able to make that. But I just had to do this. And she had a look on her face like something was going on. She didn't want to talk about it. She just wanted me to take that money and use it for this church. She lives right across the street. How would you feel if you went to the store and let's say you went to a McDonald's or something, somebody was sitting there having a cup of coffee and they looked deep in thought, a little lonely, and they did something and you just noticed them. And then you found out a day later that that person committed suicide. How would you feel? That you were in contact with somebody who was sitting there probably contemplating it. But we don't pay attention to folks. I challenged y'all to do this once before. The next time you're in you go in the office, a place where there's a lot of different people, and people just haphazardly speak. We go, hi, hi, hi. You got that high look on your face. Sometimes when the words don't come, you go, you know what I'm talking about, right? Just try it. Next time somebody says, hi, how you doing? Say, oh, I'm sick, I think I'm gonna throw up. They go, oh, good. Because we're not listening to each other.
Right.
And some of us need to be listened to. Because we got stuff going on. Even the life of the body and the happiness of it don't consist in the abundance of these things. A dinner of herbs with holy love is better than a feast of fat things. And on the other hand, this illustration by a parable of the foolishness of seeking only worldly things while we live and in the misery when we die is not only meant for that man in that parable, but it's meant for us. That man had no care about his soul and eternal life. All he cared about was his crops, his barns. And next year, he had so much of an abundance that he had to tear down the old barns, build new barns. Never once crossed his mind to give something to somebody else. All they're gonna do is what they gonna do in that barn? Rot. This parable gives us the life and death of a rich man, and it leaves us to judge whether or not he was a happy man. You think he was happy? I don't think he was happy. When asked what surprised him most about humanity, and I've told you this before, the Dalai Lama said, what surprises me most about humanity is man, because he sacrifices his health in order to make money. Then he sacrifices money to recuperate his health. Then he's so anxious about the future that he does not enjoy the present. The result being that he does not live in the present or the future. He lives as if he's never going to die, and then dies without ever really having lived. What's your more? What do you need more of? In verse 16 it says, the ground of a certain rich man brought forth plenty. Observe, his wealth lay much in the fruits of the earth. For the king himself is served by the field, according to Ecclesiastes 5:9. He He had a great deal of ground, and his ground was fruitful. Many had plenty, but he had more. Now, the fruitfulness of the earth is a great blessing. But guess what? It's a blessing which God often gives plentifully to wicked men, to whom it's just a trap, that we may not think to judge his love or his hatred, because they're rich. Their status in life becomes their personality. You ever notice that? You get around somebody that's supposed to be important, and if they're rude, we excuse it because they're important. But here are the workings of this man's heart. In the midst of this abundance, in verse 17, it tells what he thought within himself. And I want you to note here that God of heaven knows and observes whatever we think within ourselves. That's not private. It's not just to you. When you're thinking to yourself, God is here. God's listening. And we're accountable to God for what we think to ourselves. For he is both a discerner and a judge of the thoughts and intents of our heart. We mistake it. We imagine that our thoughts are hid and are free. They're not. Let us observe here about this man what his cares and concerns were. When he saw an extraordinary crop upon his ground, instead of thanking God for it or rejoicing in the opportunity it would give him to do more good, to help somebody else, that's not what he thought. He afflicted himself with this thought. He said, what shall I do? Because I have no room to bestow my fruits. He spoke about it like it was a loss. It was a problem. He had too much. And that was his problem. And it left him confused. What shall I do? Now, the poorest beggar in that town that didn't know where he could get his next meal is the person that ought to be confused. Not somebody that had so much he didn't know what to do with it. But you see, anxiety is a common fruit of abundance in this world. When you got a lot, it causes a lot of problems. You don't believe me? Hit the lottery. Watch and let somebody know. Have you ever noticed how now a lot of folks don't claim, they don't tip, they don't even claim it. They hire their lawyer, they set all that stuff up before they ever go and get that money. Because I'm telling you, it causes problems. Anxiety is the common fruit of an abundance of this world, and the common fault of those that have abundance. The more men have, the more difficulty they have with it, and the more solicitous they are to keep what they have and to add on to it. You become like this. Now I gotta put my arms all around it. Can't nothing get out, but can't nothing get in. It stops you from being able to sleep. You can't even sleep. Every time you hear something, somebody at my stuff. The rich man seems to speak this with a sigh. He said, what shall I do? Truly, he had an abundance of wealth and wants a place to put it in, and that was his problem. And he was perplexed, confused, couldn't sleep, couldn't rest, because he had so much. And he couldn't conceive of sharing with anybody. In verse 18, he exclaims, this will I do, and it is the wisest course I can take. I will pull down my barns, for they are too little, and I will build bigger and greater, and there I will bestow all my fruits and my goods, and then I shall be at ease. And then I shall be at ease. After I go build me some more barns and put my stuff in there, I'll be able to rest. Well, first it was foolish for him to call the fruits of the ground his fruits and his goods, because the property is still God's. We're just stewards of the Lord's goods, tenants at will on God's land. It is my corn, saith God, and my wine, in Hosea 2, 8 and 9. Second, it was foolish for him to hoard up what he had as if none must be given to the poor or his family, the Levite, the stranger, the fatherless, the widow, but put it all in the big grand. Third, it was foolish for him when his ground brought forth more plentiful than usual to talk of bigger barns, as if he knew what next year was going to bring. You know, years of famine commonly are followed by years of plenty, and years of plenty are therefore followed by famine. So you tear down the right size barn because you got an overflow this year. You go build a big barn, and then you got a famine next year. Fourth, it was foolish for him to think that his ease would come by building new barns. All he was doing was building more trouble. Fifth, it was foolish for him to think and to conclude absolutely without a second thought that this will I do. I will pull down my barns and will build greater, bigger barns. Yes, that I will, without so much of the necessary blessing of, if the Lord's will, if I shall live. You see, impulsive projects are foolish projects. Our times are in God's hand and not in our own. And we don't know what tomorrow's going to bring. But his hopes and his expectations were when he should have made these good projects. Then I will say to my soul, talking to his soul again, y'all, upon the credit of this security, whether God said or not, soul, mark what I say. Thou hast much goods laid up for many years in these barns. Now take thine ease, enjoy thyself, eat, drink, and be merry. And in verse 19, he also appears to be foolish, as much in the enjoyment of his wealth as the pursuit of it. But don't you know it was foolish for him to put off his comfort and his abundance till he accomplished his projects concerning it? See, when he built bigger barns and filled them, which is a bunch of work in itself, he said then he'll take his ease and rest, as if he knew how much time he had. Also, it was foolish for him to be confident that his goods were laid up for many years, as if bigger barns would be safer than the ones he already had. In an hour's time, lightning might strike and burn that barn to the ground. Or moths, rust, thieves might break in and take it. You can't put your trust in that kind of stuff. If your happiness is locked up in a barn somewhere, what happens to your happiness when something happens to that barn? Of course, it was foolish for him to count upon certain ease or risk when he had laid up abundance of his wealth of this world. You know, many things make people uneasy and restless in the midst of great abundance. You know, a dead fly might spoil a whole pot of precious ointment. Or one thorn makes you uncomfortable in your bed. Pain and sickness of the body, disagreement with relatives, a guilty conscience. All these things will rob you of your ease, if your ease is of the wealth of this world. And likewise, it was foolish for him to think of making no other use of his plenty than to eat it and drink it and to be merry. That's something right there. Your happiness is bound up in your eating and your drinking. Your eating and your drinking. I've heard people say that, what do you call it, retail therapy? They go shop. Some people go shopping to feel better. Some people eat to feel better. When you gotta eat to feel better, at a certain point, when you eat too much, what happens? You don't feel good. You feel worse. So that's just counterintuitive to think that this is gonna make me feel better. In this generation, sometimes we act as if we eat to live, or live to eat rather than eat to live. And the happiness of man is consistent in nothing else but the gratification of the flesh. If the only thing that makes you happy is stuff, you're missing something. You're missing something. But finally, the most foolish of all was for him to say this to his soul. Now, if he had said, body, take thine ease, for thou hast goods laid up for many years. Now, that would have made sense, because the body needs food and stuff. But the soul is considered an immortal spirit. It's separable from the body. As I said earlier, at the approach of death, the body, the soul, the spirit departs. It will not accept the physical condition. Now, if he had a soul of a swine, now he might have been blessed with the satisfaction of eating and drinking, because a pig loves to just eat. But what is this to the soul of a man? The soul needs things too, but it's not food. It's ridiculous how many people of this world risk their souls for wealth of the world and pleasures of the flesh. I ask you again, what's your motive? He said to his soul, take thine ease. And if God had said so too, the man might have been happy. As his spirit witnessed the spirit of believers to make them easy, but God said quite otherwise. And by his judgment of us, we must stand or fall, because it's not up to us, it's up to him. In verse 20, God said, thou fool, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Can you imagine that? Right at the pinnacle of his success, God said, it's your last night. And he spent all day figuring out what he was going to do with all his new stuff. And God said, this your last night. How would you feel? That's a death sentence. He said, this night thy soul shall be required of thee. Thou shalt require thy soul, and then who shall those things be which thou hast provided? Whose stuff is going to be then? He thought he had goods that should be his for many years, but he must part from them this night. He thought he should enjoy them himself. It's just not fair. But he had to leave them to, he didn't know who. Because he didn't really have any friends. You'd think if he had some real friends, he would have shared some of his stuff with somebody. He didn't have no friends. It is the requirement of the soul, that soul that thou art making such a fool of. What hast thou to do with the soul? Who can use it better than God? Thy soul shall be required. Now this tells us that the man was reluctant to part with it. And here's why. You see, a good man who has taken his heart away from this world is cheerful and resigns his soul at death. Remember Jesus on the cross? He said he gave up the ghost, right? That's what a good man does at death. But a bad man, a worldly man, has his soul torn from him with violence. And it's a terror for him to think of leaving this world. Thy soul, thou shalt require thy soul. God required it. He should require an account of his soul. So man, woman, what hast thou done with thy soul? It says in the scripture. Give an account of that stewardship. God asks us to be stewards of our soul. Thy shall, that is, evil angels, as the messengers of God's justice. As good angels receive gracious souls to carry them to their joy, so evil angels receive wicked souls to carry them to the place of torment.